Awesome. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
Welcome. I'm excited for tonight. Let's get Instagram rolling.
Let's get Instagram rolling. There we are. Well, welcome everyone to our Monday night. We have a special guest tonight, but first I want to thank you for joining us on YouTube and three different Facebook platforms that we're streaming to, two Instagrams, Twitch and Rumble. We are also, these will be uploaded to iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So, welcome everyone. Don't forget, comment and subscribe and like. We know you're out there. We'd love to hear from you. Well, hi, Becky.
Hello, my dear. Yes, I am so excited for tonight. I've known our guests for about 5 years now. It's crazy to think back on that. Several years in there, we're kind of lost with everything. But I am also very blessed and fortunate for that, because if it wasn't for those years where we were forced to be on the computer, I don't think that we would have the connection that we have, right? Of being on the computer and learning everything that we did and building communities, which is where I got to know our guest a little bit better. So I am very fortunate for that.
I got to meet our guest tonight 2 years ago at Hack Your Health, and then I talked to him again this year at Hack Your Health again. So, but he talked to an awful lot of people, so I really doubt he remembers me, but that's okay.
He did. He is very popular and definitely known in the space.
Yes.
And we are speaking of Mr. Dr. Shawn Baker. Welcome, Shawn. Like I said, it was a pleasure. I know we've got definitely the background of working together and you being a very popular person in the space. So you were definitely surrounded at Hack Your Health, but welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And Cher, I do remember you, by the way. So
Oh,
I do remember speaking with you, because as soon as I saw you, I said, I remember her. So anyway, yeah, well, yeah, glad for having me on. I hope you guys are having a good end of the year, and we got a good one coming up, 2025. So thanks for having me.
well,
Absolutely.
thank you for coming on. We do definitely appreciate it.
So, like I said, I know you from, what's it been, 5 years? It was 2019 when we converted over to what, MeetRx,
Yeah, end of 2019. Yeah, it's been 5 years. Yeah,
no,
goodness. Yeah,
November of 2019.
I think so. Yeah,
So I
that's
kind
right.
of end up and, know that, part, know that evolution, but what made you start? And I guess that's Sherry's question. I'll let her end up and ask it, but
That's okay. I was just curious how you got started. I mean, I followed you for a number of years, but where did that transition take place? Like what happened to get you where you're at today?
Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, even though I'm a physician, it was really my own personal interest in my own health. I was a doctor trained on, I was a surgeon, so I was operating on people and providing quote unquote healthcare. Um, but it wasn't until it was my own health that I really, really got interested in more, I guess, more lifestyle prevention and that stuff. Not stuff we're not taught in medical school. It's kind of funny that you would think that a physician would get like an A+ in lifestyle and health and that stuff and nutrition. And really most physicians get like a D+. This is like, we just don't know that stuff, honestly. And it's almost embarrassing, quite honestly. But yeah, obviously the journey I went on was it was kind of quite a long journey, and started with me trying to just get healthier for my own personal reasons, and then sort of trying to encourage some of my patients to do that. And then I realized within the current healthcare system framework, it's not really doable in many ways. It's just not supported. It's not incentivized. There's not resources. There's not time. And so that's kind of got me, kind of thinking in a different direction. And then eventually, as some people know, I left actively practicing orthopedic surgery and then got more interested in the lifestyle stuff. And eventually, where I am today, we have our company Rivero, where we actually have physicians that actually get to practice really, truly lifestyle stuff, and actually have provided all of the resources that I wish I would have had as an orthopedic surgeon. The best I could do was, hey man, go read this book or go check out this video. And in the 5 minutes I had to discuss this stuff. And now we have a situation where we've got, some physicians that get it, that want to actually get people off meds and can spend, we have teams that can spend every day with patients if necessary. So it's pretty cool. So that's kind of the short answer where I am. Obviously, a lot of stuff, controversy along the way, a couple Joe Rogan appearances, a lot of negativity thrown my way, because I was this heretic telling people to eat more meat, and but you kind of roll with it, I suppose.
And that's definitely, I mean, I remember through the trenches, right, of everyone throwing it back, but part of the evolution of this was going from Meat Heals, MeatRx to Rivero. Obviously, you also wrote a book, right, of the carnivore diet. And part of that is, yes, we focus on the aspect of making sure that people are getting quality protein. But it's also, as the evolution of Meat Heals, MeatRx, now Rivero, you align really well with us in the fact that you are one of the only carnivores, long-term carnivores, I'll put it that way. You wrote the book on it, right? And protein is the focus, but you also put in there that not everyone has to be carnivore long-term, right? It's a great tool. A lot of people can end up and stay carnivore, but it doesn't necessarily have to be end all be all, the only nutritional plan that a person follows, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and today, if you read my book, it says in there, humans are omnivores, and it talks about reintroduction of other foods in there. I mean, and that was when I wrote it back, and I really wrote that book in 2018. It was published in 2019. I really haven't changed that position. I maintain today that a strict carnivore diet can be a wonderful, incredibly powerful therapeutic tool, and it has done wonders for all kinds of people with all kinds of diseases. And I still am very much a proponent of that, and regarding long-term this or that, that's unknown and really it's kind of unknowable. I mean, we don't really know. We're never going to get a study on 50 years of carnivore diet in a metabolic ward controlling all the other variables. So really we're just kind of like left with, can you make sick people not sick and healthy? And then how long can you keep them healthy? And what do you got to do to keep them there? And I think that's, and I mean, everybody's going to age. I mean, I'm going to die. We're all going to die at some point. I mean, it's not like we're going to live forever and never going to get disease, but I think you can significantly improve the quality of life of people, perhaps improve their health span. And that's how I approach this. I do think that a carnivore diet is a very good diet for many people. I think meat is incredibly a wonderfully nutritious food. And in my view, probably the most nutritious food there is. It's not to say that you need to only eat that necessarily. I mean, it's what I do pretty much. I mean, I'm happy to do it. I like the simplicity, the ease. I like the way it feels. I'm not bothered by the fact that I don't get to eat, blue and green and pink and purple food. I care less about that stuff at this point. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I just want people to be as healthy as they can, as healthy as they want to be. I mean, some people don't care. Some people are happy to be whatever. And that's up to them.
One of the things that you just mentioned there was the fact of doing these studies, right? Everyone wants to see the science. Everyone wants to see the facts. Everyone wants, that side of it. I know you have some things in the works that are happening in regards to case studies. Are you willing to share any of that information?
Yeah, well, I mean, we have, I mean, and I say we collectively, the community, I had something to do with some of these studies. I mean, I certainly helped organize and help some of the funding and some of the stuff. So we've published a number of case series on inflammatory bowel disease and carnivore diet, depression, anxiety, carnivore diet, anorexia, carnivore diet. There's studies on a couple of weird autoimmune disease like hidradenitis suppurativa. There was obviously the David Ludwig study from Harvard, just kind of an observational study looking at a couple thousand people in the diet. In the works, there are likely going to be a couple interventional trials coming down the road, probably for starting out with diabetes. I mean, there's some pretty significant interest because there's so many diabetics, right? So that's something that I've been working with the states of South Dakota rather, and Oklahoma right now are expressing pretty significant interest. So I've got some of the legislators that I've been meeting, flying to different state capitals and meeting with people trying to get those things done and funded. Looks like we're on the way there, particularly in South Dakota. So that I think we'll have a nice big South Dakota funded diabetes study on that. I think the recent study, there's another MS study, another multiple sclerosis case series in the works right now. That'll be published probably in the next, I don't know, 3 to 6 months. And then we'll probably continue with some more. I'd like to see something on psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, which I think those will come out soon afterwards. And then probably an intervention trial with inflammatory bowel disease, because I think that's something that it really, really shines in. These people that have Crohn's disease or also colitis, gosh, they do so well with carnivore. And we'd like to see, we know some people get better with it. We know some people put their disease in remission. The question is it 50% of the people? Is it 80% of the people? Is it 5% of the people? We just don't know yet. And so that's where these interventional trials become important in that regard from a therapeutic. Now, you don't need, the average person doesn't need a study to pick whatever diet they want to go on. Your grandmother can tell you how to eat, and, that's fine. But so, some people need it, some people don't. But I think for physicians' level of comfort, and I think those studies help that, because there are, as there are a lot of physicians now that are utilizing low carb ketogenics and carnivore diets in their practice with good success. And, some of them do it at, there's some of them are kind of almost rolling the dice a little bit when they do that. Not that I think the outcomes are bad, but I think it's just they're walking on grounds where there's not a lot of research. Now, ketogenic diets, as you guys may know, there's a plethora of research that's coming out and has come out. There are thousands of studies on that have been done. And hopefully we'll see something similar with carnivore over time, because I do think it's such a powerful intervention tool.
It is definitely. Now, obviously, there's different ways of doing it. Part of that is also, like you said, with the diabetes specifically, building that case study and looking at that. There's so many other umbrella metabolic conditions that are also fixed by doing it. Part of that is, on the women's side specifically, and balancing the insulin, balancing the hormones, things like PCOS. How many people have you seen that, like PCOS or insulin resistant type, females have had success with a carnivore approach?
Oh, I couldn't even count. It's hundreds, if not thousands of people. It's pretty common, particularly when it comes to like insulin resistance and improving glycemic control, improving insulin resistance. And, and that's coupled often with obesity as a common sort of co-founder with that. So we see those things. So a lot of people that, lose weight often improve their insulin sensitivity and their overall metabolic profile. So that, those numbers are in the, thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands at this point. But specific to like PCOS, which, a lot of women do suffer from, it's gotten more and more common, but that there seems to be a component of insulin resistance in that condition. And so a lot of women, they go to the primary care, or their obstetrician and gynecologist rather, and they might be put on some hormonal therapy or something like that, or put on, metformin was a big one. And we know metformin has insulin sensitizing properties, but the reality is, you can fix it with the diet. I think it's a very fixable condition with diet for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that, through the period of when we were Meet RX and had the meetings and stuff. Just the difference in being able to have community around, having that support, being able to, navigate that with them. Because many times when someone hears carnivore diet, I'm about to say carnivore diet, there's so many different ways of doing it, right? Do I end up and do a high fat, moderate protein? Do I do, just protein? Do I just eat meat? What, how do I end up and I start a carnivore diet? Because there's so many influencers now versus, 5 years ago when there was very limited, and everyone does it a little bit different. So when you are advising people, or when you are suggesting that someone goes carnivore, where and how do they start?
Yeah, in a way, it depends on where they're coming from. If you got somebody that's really sick and has a lot of medications to deal with, and then that's where I think having some support, even physicians for it, and that's, a perfect example for like Rivera would be helpful, because if you've got to titrate down medications and you run the risk of hypoglycemia and hypotension and sometimes issues with some of these psychiatric meds. So that's where those things. But if it's somebody that's reasonably healthy, maybe they're not too unstable, irrespective of whatever ultimate goal they have. Maybe their goal is to lose 50 pounds. Maybe their goal is to put their lupus into remission or something like that. I generally just talk to them about the fact that really this has to be about changing your relationship with food and nutrition initially. That's got to be the first goal, because if we don't do that, you can't stick to it. It can't be maintained. It's like a weight loss diet. You can do it for a little while, and more often than not, just gain it right back. So I talked to them about nutritional adequacy, eating enough so that you don't want these other things, and dealing with cravings and those type of common things that come up. And I think that has to be the first issue that's addressed. And then once people get comfortable with that, then we can start tailoring and that type of stuff. But most people do with the diet. They're eating, roughly somewhere between 60 and 80% of their calories are coming from fat. There's some variation around there. Some people go a little higher, some a little bit lower, depending. There tends to be some women tend to be a little bit higher fat than men for, I think, obvious reasons. Women just tend to be a little bit more, fat, they have a little more fat on them than men do. I mean, it's just part of the differences in the sexes. People with certain neurologic conditions also seem to do better with a higher fat approach, and it includes mental health issues in many cases. I think, obviously there are a number of animal foods, and I think really one of the things, dairy becomes a kind of a gray area for some people. I mean, most people tend to do better on ruminant type meat. Doesn't mean that's all you can eat, but I mean, beef and lamb particularly, it's ubiquitous here in the U.S. I mean, particularly beef. So it's easy to come by, and it's got, I think fat becomes real important. When you go on a carnivore diet, you're largely going to be reducing your carbohydrates, sometimes to essentially zero, and fat becomes a very important aspect of that. And so if you are under consuming fat or energy, you're going to struggle, and you're going to end up with fatigue and poor energy, and maybe you start seeing your hair fall out, or maybe you feel miserable and you're starving all the time. You can't do that. You can't sustain something where, number one, you're hungry all the time, or number two, you don't like what you're eating. So you got to find something you like. And so I tell people when they start, hey, just variety. I mean, if it's got a face, had parents, you can eat it. That's where we start, and then go from there. And some, you have to adjust sometimes. It's like, hey, let's get started. Let's at least get used to not having the bread with the meal. Let's at least, and then it's a weird thing for a lot of people to let go of the fruits and vegetables, because that's got such a sort of bias that this is the healthiest food you can eat, and you need to eat lots of fruits and vegetables. And we're continually inundating with that messaging. And I think for some people, that is not the right answer. I think I don't say that, sort of flippantly. I mean, there are literally people that eat nothing but fruits, vegetables, and meat. And when they take out the fruits and vegetables, they get healthier. So it's like, well, how do you explain that? It's just, that is a clear thing that happens. And so, people, because I always hear it all the time, well, you don't need to be carnivore. If you just ate a healthy diet and didn't eat junk food, you'd be fine. I said, that probably is true for a lot of people, but there are people that it doesn't work for. And that's where I see them thriving on carnivore.
Well, and that's just it, right? Is society has definitely brainwashed a lot of people in regards. I had a question earlier today from a person that asked me, from a society standpoint, they're talking about how we need a diversity of food and we need 30 different plant foods in our diet. And I'm like, I don't even know if I like 30 different I mean, obviously I do a seasonal approach, right? We had this conversation when we interviewed on your platform, where I do supplement with other foods depending on the seasons. But even at that, I don't know that I have 30 different ones per day. And I don't think we started at that from an evolutionary standpoint, right? We were hunter gatherers, even my grandparents, great grandparents that started to, have other foods in there. We still weren't incorporating near the plant-based foods as what we are nowadays, let alone the fact of manufactured. So I agree with you. A lot of times, if we can end up for some going to elimination, incorporate what you tolerate. Doesn't have to be, the primary focus. The protein needs to be the structure, right? We need the protein. It is our building block. But the fat and the carbs, right? If you're going to end up and pull those carbs down, you have to have an energy source. Otherwise, the body's just going to end up and fatigue out. And so with that being said, when you are incorporating the meat, do you feel like some people are able to tolerate the CAFO beef versus the grass-fed, grass-finished. Do you feel like it has to be, obviously a good, better, best scenario in my opinion, but what is your opinion on that? Does a person tolerate supermarket beef, or does a person have to go grass-fed, grass-finished?
Yeah, I mean, and the answer to this. I mean, it's
I know, but some of the followers don't,
yeah,
Shawn. I'm
yeah. I
asking for
mean,
the followers, not for me.
you've got thousands upon thousands of people that go to friggin' McDonald's and get burger patties, and their health gets better. I mean, a lot of people just go to Walmart because that's what they can afford. And I don't, I mean, yes, there are nutritional, minor differences between the two, and it's not just if it was finished on grass or finished on, some sort of, total mixed ration, which is what, you think 85% of all cows in the United States right now are sitting in a pasture munching grass. 15% of them are currently in a feedlot getting finished out. So most of their time is spent on grass, right? So, I mean, the differences can be related to the breed of the cow. Maybe you should only be eating Herefords or Anguses, or maybe you only like, Charolais or something like that. That's going to make a difference. The sex of the cow is going to make a difference. The age of the cow is going to make the difference. The time of year it was when they slaughter is going to make a difference. So there's all these things that make these little minor differences. And people like to say, oh, the grass finish has a little bit higher conjugated linoleic acid and a little better omega 3 to 6 ratio. But honestly, it doesn't make that much of a difference. It makes probably effectively almost no difference. I mean, there's no detectable difference on a population level. There are individuals that will tell you that I feel better when I consume grass-finished beef. Maybe some of that might be placebo. Maybe they just feel better about it, ethically or something like that, because they have beliefs about, how the cattle should be finished. Conversely, there are people that say I feel better on grain finished beef because there's more fat and I need the fat, and the grass finished beef is just too lean for me. I've got grass finished beef producers on this carnivore diet, and they said I can't eat my own beef because it's too lean for me. So I think you can eat whatever you want, and it doesn't really matter that much. Again, there are some people that say they feel better on this or that, but we don't have any data. The Harvard University study, when they asked that question, I told the researchers when they did the study, asked the question, grass finished, grain finished, no differences in outcome. When we surveyed 12,000 people, no differences in outcome. There's no studies out there that show that in human trials. Yes, there's studies that show that nutritional differences exist, but how does that actually end up, having clinical effects on human beings? So far, we don't see any. And I'll be the first one to say, I mean, if we get some studies that strongly show that grain finished is better or grass finished is better, I'll be the first guy to say this is what we know. But as of 2020, almost 2025, all I can say is eat what you enjoy, and that should be fine. You can always test it and see what you want to do. You can try it later, but you don't have to start out with grass finished beef. You can certainly go with whatever you prefer. I prefer, my diet is probably 90% grain finished beef. I'll eat grass finished beef from time to time. I enjoy it less, but I'll eat it. I think it's good. I mean, it's fine, but I mean, I enjoy a nice, well marbled USDA prime fatty hunk of meat. That's my preference. And, I think I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. I can get, obviously I'm in Nebraska, and so I'm in cattle country. I have access, within 30, 40 minutes of me to get locally raised beef. Obviously I can afford it. I buy it, half a beef at a time. We're getting a half a beef in February. But it's grain finished and I tolerate it. I always tell my coaching clients, eat what you can afford, right? It doesn't have to be the grass-fed, grass-finished, because a lot of times just what you can afford. Many people, are living paycheck to paycheck. So maybe that means going to the grocery store and getting, whatever's on sale. That's fine. But the other side of that is, I agree with you, the fatty cuts, right? Piedmontese is a beef cattle, here in Nebraska, and it's very lean, very muscular beef. Love it, but it is very lean. Very much like bison. It's a very lean meat. And so if you're looking at things for like the mental health and the insulin resistance and those side of things that need the aspect of the fat, I mean, you're going to be adding a lot more fat, in my opinion, if you're going with those leaner cuts. So, what all on that side? I mean, obviously, I know I have a coach that works with us. She's come off of mental health medicine. in relationship to the mental health benefits and the psyche benefits that you've seen. What all have you seen improved with a carnivore diet or carnivore diet? I'm used to calling it carnivore diet.
A lot of things, certainly depression, major depressive disorder. We see bipolar disorder resolve for many people. We see anxiety get improved. We see people with PTSD actually get better. ADHD gets better. Autism improves symptomatically. A lot of people notice like that we have a lot of adults with autism that are on carnivore, and they say their sort of emotional lability is better. Their perseverations are better. Their ability to handle emotional things is better. I've seen Tourette syndrome get better. I've seen, schizophrenia get better. And there, we actually have studies on there. Like I said, there was an animal-based ketogenic carnivore diet where they did a case series where it was anxiety and depression, and they showed that anxiety improved within 7 weeks, depression improved, I think, within 12 weeks. So most of the gamut of things, we've seen Matt Phillips down in New Zealand has seen improvements with, carnivore keto diets in things like Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, ALS, which is pretty amazing. So maybe not total cures, but certainly improvements. And so I think that, the brain is no different than any other organ in the body. It still needs nutrition. It still needs good nutrition. And when you're not getting good nutrition, the brain suffers and you get diseases that show up with symptoms. And so, yeah, just about, I'll be so bold as to say, I think good nutrition will affect every single disease process there is. I think that's a fair statement. I mean, some it's curative, some it's not, but I mean, it'll always improve it, or generally will always improve it.
It'll definitely take a lot of these areas into that improvement, with the aspect, obviously, I take it a little bit beyond just the nutrition side of things, where making sure your person's getting quality sleep, making sure they're doing,
Yeah, of course, yeah.
not stressing themselves out, burning the candle at both ends, right? So all of those type of practices in addition to, but I do think nutrition is a very strong part of that pillar of health. You can't out exercise a bad diet, vice versa, right?
Yeah, I mean, not for
Speaking of,
very
I know
long
you,
anyway. Yeah, yeah. You can
yeah,
for a short period of time. And I did that for a number of years until, well, I thought I did. In retrospect, I probably was able to do it for about 5 or 6 years. And then it caught up with me and really let me know by the time I was in my early 40s. I was like, nah, this ain't working.
which was where I was kind of gonna go with that, is you have done several. I mean, obviously anyone that is, watching and following tonight has seen your picture that we posted in the graphic, right? You have been able to set some different records as a carnivore. You've also been able to shift your body composition, whether it's doing the fattier cuts, doing the leaner, kind of transitioning with that. So which route do you feel best helps improve the body composition and also improves your sports performance? I know you're doing a little bit different
Mhm.
exercises now than what you have been doing. Have you noticed any difference in endurance or your level of activity with those?
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting. My birthday is on the 10th of January. And I plan on breaking another world record on my birthday just for my present to myself. And I think I'll do that. And so, I have found that I can manipulate, gain weight, lose weight, get leaner with carnivore with not too much difficulty. It sort of allows me. I mean, obviously, when you lose weight, you're eating a little less. I mean, generally, I mean, that's going to happen, right? I mean, if you're a 300-pound dog, you got to eat so much food. If you're a 15-pound, poodle or whatever, what's a 15-pound dog? Shit's no, that maybe a 5-pound Chihuahua. You're going to eat a lot less. I mean, so a lot of people, it's interesting because people start out 300 pounds or they lose 60 pounds on carnivore and then they stall out. And I'm like, well, you're a smaller animal now. You got to eat less food. You just need less. So a lot of people can't comprehend that. So they have to sort of reshift their framework. I have tried a leaner approach, and I would call it fat cycling, where I would eat leaner cuts of meat for 3 or 4 days, and then I would add some fat back in, and that would help me to prevent me from going into that, that cold period, that hungry period, that thyroid saying, wait a minute, we're not getting enough energy. And I've done that, and that's been successful for me, and I got really lean doing that. Again, because the question is performance versus body composition, you perform better when you're not super, super lean. I think for what I do for strength sports, being really, really lean, you take a nice picture and stuff, and people like to see that. But from a performance standpoint, you need a little bit more body fat at least for what I do. I have had success on a higher fat approach at times. I mean, this is, when I got really, really, really skinny way back in, I think it was in 2020, I got all the way down. Like I think I was under 210, which is, I hadn't been that high, that weight since like my freshman year in college. Cause I normally walk around at 260, 270, 280. And I was too thin. I felt like I was a, cachectic cancer patient at that weight, but I was playing with this really, really high fat, fairly low protein, approach, just playing with some blood glucose stuff. I was reading about the work of this guy named Louis Newberg from the University of Michigan before they had insulin, and they were treating type 1 diabetics with diet, and that's what they used. And I was just playing with it, see what would happen. And sure enough, I mean, my glucose was bottomed out low. But I also, I lost too much lean mass from my personal preference. And so I couldn't do that over the long haul. So for me, I like to consume, roughly on average about a pound or sort of a gram of protein per pound of body weight, something in that neighborhood. I'm right now I'm 250 pounds. I'll eat about 250 grams of protein a day typically. I might go a little bit lower on that. If I want to lose weight, I think it's helpful. The thing, and I had a nice discussion with Amber O'Hearn about this the other day, this so-called energy-centric model of satiety and hunger is that, you get in this thing, let's just say, for instance, I want to lose some weight. And I'm going to cut my food back a little bit. Say, and let's use calories just for the convenience of, just discussion. I know some
energy molecule.
Yeah, energy, whatever, energy molecule, volume, whatever you want to use. There's some amount that you're cutting it by, right? And in order to, so your body says, I need this much energy every day to be happy and feel good, right? And then you say, I'm going to cut some of that out. So now your body might have it and might say, well, I've got body fat I can utilize, we can liberate it, and you still feel good. And this is like effortless fat loss. You're just sitting there like, hey, I feel pretty good. I'm not hungry. I'm not eating much food. I'm fasting maybe, and I'm not even hungry. That means your body is supplying whatever you cut out. It's making up the difference. Now, the difference is if you're hungry, it ain't getting it. So you might say, I'm going to cut out 500 calories out of my diet. I'm going to do that for a week. That's 3,500 calories. In theory, I should lose a pound of fat. Well, if you spend half that time hungry, you're not utilizing 500 calories. You might be using 100. So now you're hungry all the time, and your body doesn't like that. So now you're dealing with hunger, and you've got cravings, and you're tired, and you're cold, and you're grouchy, and you're irritable. It's a miserable experience. And so sometimes a higher fat approach, paradoxically, will lead to greater fat utilization through ketosis. I mean, we know that ketones can help stimulate things like hormone sensitive lipase, so that you start to liberate more of your own fat. So there's some thoughts that like some people that have done prolonged fasting, and I'm not necessarily a proponent of that for my own self because I'm too much of an athlete for that to be really a good strategy for me. But some people notice it. First day or so was kind of rough, and then I got in day 3, and I was just like, I'm not hungry. Well, what's going on? You're producing a lot. You're probably in deep ketosis. The ketones are probably helping you to liberate some of that fat, and you're supplying your needs. Now, again, there's a limit to that, and I think there's some things you need to do. You need to preserve that lean mass, and that has to do with stimulating the muscle, lifting weights, strength training, whatever. So that even if you're just doing isometrics and flexing, you got to stimulate that stuff. So there's a number of ways, and I'm not dogmatic about one thing. I think many people will do well just going a little bit leaner for a while. That works pretty reliably for many people, although sometimes you're dealing with a little bit more hunger. I think the high fat approach can certainly work in the right context. I've seen a lot of people have success with that. But again, it depends on the goal and some of the other things that are going on. If you got depression and you're trying to lose some people have goals that it's like, those going to be tough to do at the same time. It's like the person says, I want to lose 50 pounds and I want to gain 30 pounds of muscle at the same time. I'm like, good luck with that.
Yeah.
It's just like,
Yeah.
come on, man. It's like a miracle. I want whatever, I want a new car or something like that. It's not that easy. So sometimes you got to pick your goals. It's like some people that have all kinds of gut issues and they want to gain, or they want to gain weight. And I'm like, well, you're not even absorbing food. Let's fix your gut issues first. Let it calm down. And then when you're healthy, then you can do these things. And, some people, I've seen some people made this comment. You don't really necessarily lose weight to get healthy. You get healthy to lose weight. And I think there's some value in that sentiment. So fix the underlying, whatever, gut issues, nutritional deficiencies, get healthy in a position, and then it's better to lose weight after that if that's your goal. Not, and again, I realize that not everybody needs to lose weight. Some people need to gain weight, which is kind of funny because I've heard that one of the criticisms of carnivore diet is, well, if just losing weight anyway will fix those problems. Well, it doesn't fix anorexia. We got people with anorexia getting better on a carnivore diet. They don't need to lose weight. They need to put on 30, 40 pounds. So it's an interesting thing. Yeah, but it's a common problem.
And I think that's the important thing right there is it doesn't matter whether you're losing weight or whether you need to gain weight. It's essentially putting the nutrition in there, right? Getting that quality nutrition and getting it back in there, because a lot of people are under eating. They're not eating enough. And that's where they need to end up and focus first. But I think you kind of nailed it, because there's a lot of people that will come to me and say, and females even especially, that they're eating quite a bit, right? They're eating like 1.2, 1.5 up to 2+ grams per pound of body weight, because they're carnivore, they're strictly meat only. And I've had several ask me, do you think that is too much? Well, it depends on their goal, but if their goal is to lose weight, then they may end up and be, like you said, eating a little bit too much energy, calorie. I hate the calorie in, calorie out model, but essentially if you're not losing weight, you have to create a deficit somewhere. You either need to move your body, right? Or create that deficit somehow, some way. You can't just eat
the calories in, calories out model. I mean, there's all kinds of issues with that. I mean, can we accurately measure calories in? What are we absorbing? Or what is our microbiome utilizing rather than us? So there's some slop in that system. And the calories out, do I have any control over my body heat? Can I regulate how much my body heat burns? Can I regulate my heart rate? Can I regulate all these things? So there's a lot of things that affect that calories outside of the equation. And some of them we can control. Some of them we can exercise a little bit, but exercise not really much. I mean, I tell people, hey, like, as you guys may notice, I'm standing here. And one of the things you probably notice if you're walking stream, my arms are flopping around a little more, whereas the people that are sitting there are a little more stuck, right? That's neat. That's non-exercise activity thermogenesis. I'm moving more. I'm burning stuff just by, and it's not tiring. It's not like I'm exercising. It's just because I'm just fidgeting more. And that's something that I talk to people. Hey, let's just stop being sedentary. Let's just stand rather than sit. Sleep. I mean, sleep's a huge one, right? I mean, you mentioned these other factors, and again, I'll be the first one to admit, I think nutrition is foundational. If you don't have good nutrition, you can stand in front of red lights, you can ground, you can do all this other stuff. But if you don't get your nutrition taken care of, you're going to really struggle. But it's not the only thing. Like you mentioned, you probably have to address sleep. You have to address sedentary behavior. You have to address some of the circadian biology. There's a whole host of other things, and some of them are, big levers, and some of them are smaller, but yet so important levers that some people have to sometimes utilize.
Yeah, I definitely, I started 3.5 years ago, Googled keto, and took me down a rabbit hole. And here I am today, co-host of a podcast about healing the whole body. But I did do carnivore. I've done carnivore, and I'm still doing carnivore for the last year and a half. Now I've had to incorporate fats to that, and fermented foods, because in the middle of that, and I am trying to reverse my type 2 diabetes. In fact, I worked with one of your people on your staff, Dr. Ellie Gerard. So I worked with him last summer. He got me off of metformin, but what ended up happening was my hormones and thyroid were tanked. So I had to go back, and I'm having to fix that now in order to get back on track again. So, but carnivore has it's easy. It's really easy to do, and I'm 1,000% better than where I was, 3.5 years ago when I started. But I have a question here from Texas MK lady Jessica. She said, Dr. Baker, any info about carnivore and fibroids during pregnancy? I'm sure it's my best treatment option. And she put a smiley face, meaning carnivore. So,
Yeah. I mean, I can't specifically say there's a study on carnivore diets and women that are pregnant and have fibroids. I mean, that's just not been done. But I can tell you that, what is a fibroid? Fibroid is an abnormal growth, right? You have these, these cells in the uterus that the muscle wall, and it's growing abnormal. It's like like a skin tag, or a lipoma, or any of these little growths that we see. These often are under the influence of growth hormones, growth-like hormones. So insulin would be one of them. Fibroids or sometimes have a response to some of the estrogen, progesterone hormones. Probably, I think it's more likely estrogen. And so when you can improve that, I mean, the same thing with like the prostate. You see guys with, it's very common to see guys after age 67, they all got swollen up prostates because and it's very, very highly correlated with obesity. Because when we see people that are obese, often their insulin levels are high. Their insulin is growth. I mean, excess body fat is growth. It's literally a growth on your body due to this sort of continuous stimulation for growth. Remember, insulin is a storage hormone, a growth hormone. And so I think when you improve your overall insulin levels, we often see these things like uterine fibroids and benign prostatic hypertrophy and skin tags and lipomas all shrink down. So it's certainly possible. Carnivore in pregnancy, there's plenty of women who have done it. I'm not saying it's the only, I mean, obviously there's a lot of women that don't do carnivore during pregnancy. Interestingly, of the women that I've known that have done carnivore, and there have been many, many hundreds now at this point, many of them will say the first trimester is challenging, and they have a lot more cravings during that time. Sometimes they'll have, certain other non-carnivore foods, which, again, I'm not dogmatic about this. But yeah, I think the things that generally help us to improve our overall metabolic health, and I think carnivore is a good way to do that, would help with something like a fibroid. I mean, it can be very, during pregnancy, shortly out, during birth, during lactation and breastfeeding, meat is a wonderful fuel. I mean, it's just a wonderful fuel for the developing fetus, for the baby, the breastfeeding baby. So it can be a great thing. So I don't think it would be a bad idea necessarily. And again, I mean, with the usual CYA caveats, make sure you're taking prenatal vitamins. Let your obstetrician know in case they have some concerns about pregnancy. But whether you're pregnant or not, fibroids, I have seen a number of women improve that situation with a carnivore or low carb ketogenic diet. And that includes also things like endometriosis and some of these others, unique women issues. We've seen a lot of that improve with this, hit menopause, so on and so forth.
absolutely. And then I have one more question. PO.keto said, Dr. Baker, I've been keto carnivore since 2018. I had a stroke 2 years ago due to high blood pressure. I've been put on meds for it. When I've tried to wean myself off of, my blood pressure still goes back up. Any suggestion? I'd like to get off the meds, but am I destined to be on them?
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't have a crystal ball.
Right.
Maybe, who knows? I mean, well, I mean, I think, and again, I don't know enough about your details there. Keto carnivore, do we know why the blood pressure was high? I mean, most often we have this so-called essential hypertension or idiopathic hypertension where we don't really know. Sometimes it's like a known like kidney issue or something like that. So knowing the reason for that might be helpful. But in general, and again, you said you've been on keto and carnivore. Usually, what we see as people reduce, again, insulin and inflammation. Because a lot of times hypertension is associated with vascular inflammation. It's also, not surprisingly, associated with hyperinsulinemia, and the fact that when the kidney is exposed to high levels of insulin, it tends to hold on to a lot more salt, and that increased salt retention leads to, extension of the blood vessels. So we have this increased pressure in there. So potentially, I mean, it could be. I mean, it could. And again, I'd have to see what specifically is going on with you, what medicines you're on. I mean, this would be another perfect, use case for Rivero. This is the type of situation where you have somebody that has these issues, and you need somebody that can actually follow up and find out these questions, because I can't do this in this format because I don't have enough information. But it's potential. You can get off that. So first, I'm sorry you had the stroke. Certainly, that's a real sorry thing to hear. I don't know what it left you with. Some people have a stroke and it's catastrophic. I mean, they can't walk anymore, or they can't talk anymore. A lot of people, and this is something that I think is important to realize. A ketogenic diet, a carnivore diet, a low carb diet can improve your health. You're not going to live forever. You still might have a disease. You still might get sick. There's things that can still happen to you that may or may not be related to the diet. And in many cases, you have to realize, while diet is important, there are other things that go on. Stress alone is like 30% of heart disease. There's some studies that suggest that just how much stress you're exposed to can lead to, this. And so there's other things out there besides just what you're eating.
Absolutely. So I'm sure you probably remember him from back in our Meet RX days of UK James asks, is carnivore helping natural testosterone levels in male, any plus or minus?
Well, I think, again, if you are consuming an adequate amount of food, and I think this caveat's important, right? I think that in general, and there's exceptions, is generally most people report improvements in the clinical expression of testosterone. And I'd say that very sort of, deliberately, because what is the clinical expression of testosterone? Can I put on muscle? Am I relatively lean? What's my sexual function like? Do I wake up with an erection as a male? What am I doing cognitively? What's my mood like? So when testosterone is working well in the body, all those things are working, pretty well. What causes that to happen? It's not how much free testosterone you have, right? I mean, that's part of the equation, but also part of the equation is how receptive how sensitive are your receptors, right? So you can have a phenomenon where you have really sensitive receptors. You just don't need that much testosterone. And that may be arguably a better situation, right? Think about insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. Would you rather have lots of insulin or really really sensitive receptors and not need as much insulin? Because there's, like I said, insulin has a lot of effects. One of the effects is to help with blood glucose regulation. So when insulin resistance is occurring, you can't keep your blood glucose low. But guess what? Insulin sensitivity for fat storage still remains. So you have high insulin. You can't get your blood glucose down, but you can store the hell out of fat. So it's working for that. So in many cases, and that's why I talk to people, because I see all these guys, these young guys, my testosterone is only 300. It should be 600. And they're asymptomatic. And they go to a doctor and they get on steroids, basically. They get on testosterone so they can get stronger in the gym. But at the same time, what are they doing? They're probably downregulating their testosterone receptor. They may have some off side effects, maybe prostate effects and other things that we don't fully understand. So yeah, but I mean, generally, both men and women tend to see an improvement in overall hormonal performance. If I can use that word, I think that makes better sense. Okay.
Awesome. Absolutely. So one of the other questions before, and we're going to kind of roll this into the final question for YouTube and stuff before we move into the Q&A for the BNC community and the MFF challenge, is someone asked any tips for stress eating, binging on carbs. But the way I'm going to end up and preface that is you can do anything for 30 days. And I know we have World Carnivore Month coming up in January. So that's one of the ways to get stress eating is just plan on doing something for 30 days. But how would you end up and address that? And then also speak to World Carnivore Month, how that evolved and what that entails.
Yeah, I'll take the second part of that part first, because that's an easy question. So World Carnivore Month started 8 years ago. This will be our 8th year, January 2025. It started in January 2018. Simply because that January is veganuary, right? They have this vegan month, and I'm born in January, and I was like, I'm the carnivore guy. I don't like the fact that my birthday month is a vegan month. So I said, I'm going to call this World Carnivore Month. So I actually literally started it back in 2018. That was our first year. And so that's where that came from. But now the question about binge eating, stress eating, that's a real common issue. I mean, we have people that, they struggle with cravings mightily. And so I think the things that you can do to sort of stack the odds in your favor, you want to make it easy on yourself. Don't make life hard on yourself. Is one, if you can get the stuff out of your house, right? Don't have it in the house. So now you got to really work for it. If you have Uber, don't get the Uber Eats and the whatever DoorDash crap off your phone. That stuff is a disaster, right? Consume plenty of nutritious food so that you're just full. You're just like, I don't want, how much meat do I eat? You eat enough so I don't want a cupcake or whatever. Keep that going. Have a plan for cravings. Most people, because I ask people, what are you going to do for cravings? What's your plan? They look at me with a blank stare. I said, well, if you don't have a plan, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? So have a plan. Most cravings are time limited, 30, 45 minutes. We know based on hormonal surges, things like ghrelin in particular. So if we know this craving is going to last for 45 minutes, can I get through 45 minutes? Yeah, I can go for a walk. I can call somebody. I can, watch a show. I can listen to music. I can drink a bunch of water and stretch my mechanoreceptor so it kind of shuts down some of that cravings stuff. That's something. The other thing, and this is important, I had a nice discussion with somebody on this sugar addiction guy this morning, talking about a lot of kids that start out, obese kids, they started out using like sugary stuff as a emotional soother, right? This is how they deal with emotional crisis. They just eat they just load up on dopamine with, chocolate box or something like that, or whatever their favorite food might be. And so you have to say, how else can I deal with, these little traumas that occur? Sometimes it's as easy as just doing some, diaphragmatic breathing, just sit there and just, breathe in through your nose, fill your belly up, blow it out, do that 10, 15 times. That puts you in a more parasympathetic mode. It's sort of, it can be calming in that way. So you got to figure out a way to calm yourself outside of, let me do that. But again, if you got junk in your house, you're going to find it and eat it, right? Now, if you live by yourself, it's easy. You live with family members and they're not on board, you got to have a discussion. You say, hey, look, I really need help. I need support. And this is the other thing, a supportive environment. This is why these communities are important, because carnivore is weird, right? It's still weird today, even in 2024, 2025, as we start to be. So many people are not on board with this. And so the house might still be full of, garbage that's there. So you got to figure out a way to deal with that. If you can convince the family to buy into helping you and say, hey, look, guys, I need to get through this stuff and deal with this stuff. Can we at least not for the month of January or whatever, just take the stuff out of the house, stick it in the garage, hide it somewhere, go hide it somewhere. Don't tell me where it is, right? Something like that. Keep me accountable, and then, have appropriate food. If you need a snack, I mean, like I said, Becky's great at making her little tallow bites and whatnot, but I mean, I do things like dehydrated meat. I mean, it's like a potato chip. I mean, it's so damn good. You get in there, get a little fatty cut of thinly cut meat, throw it in a food dehydrator with some salt on it, throw it on the kitchen counter in a bag, and you're like, oh man, this is a good snack,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I think it's, there's a physiologic aspect to binge eating, to cravings. That's addressed by just making sure you're well nourished, right? And then there's the psychological aspect, and that's how do we comfort ourselves? And you just have to say, look, food is not it anymore for me. Sugar's not doing me any favors. We know it is. I mean, we know it's harming us, right? That's the definition of addiction, doing things repeatedly that are harmful to you and still doing it anyway. I don't care if it's gambling, heroin, porn addiction, whatever. If it's harming you and you know that going in, it's an addiction problem. You got to address it. Okay?
Absolutely. I will finish though. Before I kick everyone off, Charlie and Marilyn say, hello, Dr. Baker. Wonderful you're here supporting Becky and Sherry's channel. Share about your carnivore puppies also.
Me?
Yes, you.
Like my puppy?
Charlie and Marilyn want you to share about how your puppies are eating carnivore.
Oh, yeah, Maximus and Sashi. So Maximus is a 9-year-old Coton de Toulier. It's a little fancy French, same dog. He's a little big white fluff ball. Toulier is a little city in Madagascar where they originally came from. And their Coton means cotton in French. So they were little French dogs. Apparently some French white dogs jumped off a boat. They crashed or something, went down near Madagascar. They swam to Madagascar. They breeded with the local dog, and they became the royal dog of Madagascar. So that's Mr. Maximus. He's my coach. He's my cheerleader in the gym. And then Sasha is a 12, nearly 13-year-old white golden retriever. they've been doing carnivore for just about as long as I have. So I've been doing it now 8 years. I just finished my 8th year, so I'll be starting. This would be the beginning of my 9th year right now. They've been doing it about a year less than me. So I just feed them a lot of ground beef. I mean, and I throw up a little, Costco has these little chicken strips, which is just basically only chicken. And they eat that. That's basically their diet, ground beef and chicken. And they've been eating that for, I don't know, the last 7 years for the most part. They do great. They're happy. They're wonderful. They're good weight. I took Sasha to the vet because I had to fly, and to fly, you have to have a stupid vet appointment to make sure they can safely fly. And I told her she was like almost 13, and the vet was like, no way. They're like, we never see dogs this healthy at this age, this particular breed. And she was really impressed with that. Of course, I didn't get into nutrition because I go into the vet's office and there's bags of, whatever, Hill Science diet and all the vet crap, the kibble crap they try to push on you. But anyway, yeah, they're doing well. Dogs are happy. I'm happy. They love to eat. They're excited.
Awesome. All right. Well, I kick the other YouTube and Facebook and all of them off. I know we're pushing our hour with you, but if anyone in the BNC community that's been sitting in the background watching has questions, feel free to either post them in the chat or ask them, and I will relay them.
All right. Well, yeah, get those YouTube people out of there. Dang it.
Bye, YouTube. If you want to join the rest of it, feel free to join the community. But so long and see you all. All right. Anyone in the community have any questions? And
well, I've got a ribeye waiting on me. I'm going to cook that for dinner. Same thing I had for breakfast or lunch or whatever it was. I think it was lunch. So
awesome. Sounds good. Anyone? I am not seeing questions.
Nobody. Everybody's shy. I don't know how many people you got in there. I can't see, but anyway.
April is talking, but I'm going to have to relay it because I don't think you're hearing her. But go ahead, April. Okay. Okay, so April's question, Shawn, is she's a type 1 diabetic and sometimes finding the right amount of protein for her because her blood sugar can end up and elevate or fluctuate. So how would you recommend navigating that?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if she's in the context of carnivore diet or whatever it might be. I mean, generally, type 1 diabetics, the typical treatment is, eat whatever and bolus, chase, count your carbs and things like that. And that can be very frustrating because it's hard to match that up. Dave Dykman does a really nice job of talking about that, based on the work of Dr. Bernstein. But I think that, one thing to realize is that, again, this is one of the problems with protein in diabetics. We need protein. Obviously, we need it for muscle, and other structural stuff. But one of the things is there's like a threshold for a lot of people. So you realize that, a type 1 diabetic tends to not have enough insulin. They're obviously supplementing, they're injecting it, or they've got a pump or something like that. But generally, they don't have issues with glucagon. And glucagon is produced by the alpha cells, and the pancreatic beta cells produce the insulin. And protein will actually stimulate glucagon, and there's a threshold amount for most people. Some people say it's in between 25 and 50 grams or something like that. So some